This is Radio Logic, the show about digital identities, the people behind it, the tech behind it, and in each episode we'll cover what works, what doesn't, and what's next. Let's dig into it. Welcome to Radio Logic, the monthly podcast. Today I'm joined by Michael from CyberIAM. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
You're quite a name in the services industry when it comes to deploying identity solutions at customers.
That is our speciality. So CyberIAM started about 9.5 years ago. We identified a gap in the market after a few acquisitions and started the business. We've been growing year on year, specializing in the identity space, focused in UK and parts of EMEA. It's a niche for us, and it's what we do best.
And judging from your accent, I can tell that that part of EMEA is more of the southern part, isn't it?
Yeah, we do have a team in South Africa. It's our nearshore team. It's been a really good balance between the European consultants and the South African ones.
That's a pretty interesting mix. But tell me, because I've also in my past history I've operated across the globe, but I've also done projects in Africa, and there's a bit of a difference in both culture and how you achieve things. What if you were to sort of hash out the differences? What would you say? A bank in London versus a bank in South Africa.
So I think from a requirements perspective, there's no difference. We've worked on some large banks in South Africa, some large banks in the UK. They all need to get to the same place. I think doing business in Africa compared to Europe is a little bit more challenging from a negotiate. You've got to negotiate certain legislation, politics in the African side, and then obviously the European side is a lot more regulated. So you're dealing with a lot stricter regulation and rules.
But essentially, they comply with the same type of framework. They all have the same, as you say, requirements.
Identity is identity. Right?
Identity is identity. Yeah. That's true. But you guys are specialized on a whole range of identity disciplines, isn't that right? You do both IGA, PAM. What else?
Yeah, everything. So we started with IGA, we moved into PAM, then IAM. But the identity sort of life cycle circumference has expanded over the last few years. So we do EPM and certificates management and secrets management, and so the full spectrum of everything that touches identity, and that's now moving into the machine identity and agentic AI.
So, and that's, in fact, when you bring that up, that's something that we look at on a constant daily basis. We look at what we call the three identity problem, yep, which is basically the human identity, the non-human identity, and the agentic AI identities. And they all are identities, but they're being governed slightly different, and they have slightly different specs. I mean, we're going to talk more about AI in a future podcast, yep, but the ephemeral nature of agentic AI is something that's challenging. But have we solved human identity? I mean, it's matured, but have we solved it?
The biggest humor or joke in the identity space is when you get told what the end date of the identity project is. There's never an end date to identity. It never stops. Applications continue to, even if you've got all your controls in place, you've got all of your processes in place, you're doing your JML, your certification, access requests, segregation duties, it's all there. Well, now you get another 5,000 applications coming in over the next 3 years in your business. It never changes. It never stops.
But that must be difficult as a customer when you're procuring this type of project. Let's say you're migrating away from some ancient technology and you want to modernize it. How do you even spec that out? What do you set as expectations, and how do you approach someone like CyberIAM to scope that out?
So I think because identity is so big and the to get your arms around all of it is such a challenge and a never-ending struggle. I think you need to look at the regulations. You need to look at the benefits to the business, and you need to look at the outcomes. I think we've spoken too much in the past at looking at what do you want to do rather than what do you want to achieve. So looking at an outcome-based approach is the best way to approach the identity project, and it needs to be based on the bigger picture of the business requirements that you're trying to resolve. So it could be an audit finding, or it could be a ROI on a huge application. You need to look at what's the outcome.
Is that what normally sparks a new identity project, an audit finding, or?
Yeah, it's either a change to regulations, and then there's obviously in certain industries. If you look at the TSA one that came into the telecoms industry, it's then sparks a whole bunch of change, or there's a new audit finding or bunch of audit findings that come in from the external auditors that then need to be addressed.
And that's normally the CISO that you talk to that is kind of freaking out and says that we need to do something, or who's the stakeholders within the customers that are normally circling that up to the surface?
That's a loaded question. So we want it to be the CISO, and we want the sponsor to be the CEO. I did once work with a bank where the CEO was the sponsor of the identity project, and it got stuff done because no one was saying no, because it had to go back up to the CEO when it failed. But yeah, you want your CISO to be a sponsor. You don't want it to be in IT if you can help it, because it's not a technology problem. It's a people problem and a risk problem that you're trying to fix, that you use technology to help you achieve.
But I see, and I follow some of the sort of EU regulations. We have NIS2 and DORA. NIS2 has recently been transposed in most European countries, and the UK is obviously, even though no longer part of the European Union, they're so close, and they still deliver services to European countries, so they're part of that problem domain. And one of the good things there, in my mind, is the fact that they actually raise the bar when it comes to responsibility and accountability. And they put that on, the senior executives and the board members. If something goes wrong, it's their responsibility. So that must be something that's easier to get the funding and the attention that it needs, isn't it?
The easiest way to get funding is when an audit funding lands on a board's table and the board takes action. It's kind of a pity, because we find the best projects that we run are the ones where the organization's been proactive and not waiting for an audit finding. Because when you have an audit finding, you have a deadline and you have panic. And then you have to maybe rush certain parts of a delivery into the organization rather than take your time to do it how you'd like to do it. So the best way is to be proactive around the controls. NIST is there for everyone to read, so you know what's going to come down the pipeline. So it's starting proactively rather than waiting for the audit finding. But that's easier said than done to get the budget.
I was just about to say, is that really how most customers approach this?
It's not how most do.
There's probably a lot of panic and we need to resolve this ASAP.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that it's not proactive, but most customers will react to an industry change or a finding.
But I mean, you've been in this space the same amount of time as I have, and it's gone from one type of projects to another, and it's kind of we're solving the same problem. It just changes slightly in my world. But is there a significant difference from the problems that we're dealing with today versus how it all started, right? Back in the days when it kind of was an infrastructure problem. We had directories that needed to be synchronized. Now it's more about reducing the risk surface and lowering the surface of problems that could haunt you as an organization.
Yes, I think back in the day when it was called identity management, it was pretty much provisioning and automation. Then in the days when IGA came along, that's when governance came in. So then now we need to take all this data we've got access to, all the access data we've got, and go certify it and govern it. And so, but since IGA started, the problem hasn't changed. People need access to the right things at the right time, and that reduced risk is still there. It hasn't really changed. It's just how you get access and what you get access to has changed.
When you bring in your consultants, are they focusing on risk reduction, or is it more delivering towards solving some of these controls that have been failed by an audit, for example? Or how are the projects being structured?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix. So, if there's audit findings, the first few phases is to get rid of those findings and to be able to appease the auditors and make sure that they're happy the controls are met. But then the next phase is we often do assessments and come in and say, how can we then further reduce your risk across your identity landscape? So then that becomes another phase. Or if the CISO has gone on a risk reduction program, then we might start off looking at risk, which is what we prefer because that's what the industry is there for.
And I'm going to provoke you a little bit here. The fact that you're basically a returning element at some of these customers, you keep doing the same thing over and over again. Is that a result of that these projects just drag out, or that the landscape changes, or that they actually fail at some point? And I'm not just pointing at CyberIAM. I'm talking about the wider community of people that are putting these solutions in place. Do projects fail?
Yes.
Why is that?
Projects fail because there's not honesty and clarity between the delivery partner and the customer, and an understanding of what they want to achieve and what you've scoped out to achieve. So I think we were discussing before the podcast that we had a customer where we went into an RFP against another delivery partner. We went in at a certain rate. They went in at double that price. And as soon as day one happened, with the other partner, change orders came in, and then the customer had to pay double what we were quoting. So, we pride ourselves on honesty and delivery, and not putting a whole bunch of assumptions and exceptions to pull the wool over customers' eyes. We believe that integrity in this very, very small industry, when everyone knows each other, is how you survive.
And in fact, that's why we partner with you guys, because we know that you have that type of track record and that kind of pathos on how to engage with clients. But that is not the case. I mean, I've seen so many failed projects. We talk about role-based access control, for example. Back in '92, that was a model that kind of popped up, and every vendor tried to fit that into their products. And then, identity management came around, and we use that to encapsulate entitlements. And it's a great model because it abstracts away, but does it really work?
It works when it's done
in moderation,
in a measured way for the right reasons. So I have seen a bank that has 60,000 employees and has 350,000 roles. That doesn't make sense. Right?
Yeah, how do you manage that?
You don't. So, but I think when you use roles to bite off the big chunks of the known, that's the good use of roles. But when you try and go and say, I'm going to make sure that every single entitlement is part of a role and there will be no individual entitlements requested, then you will never finish the project.
So what's the option? What are your customers looking at as not necessarily a replacement? I realize that roles will kind of always be there. They serve a good purpose. They make access reviews easier because you can encapsulate and you can look at the roles instead, and it streamlines provisioning. But is that the future when it comes to dealing with the ephemeral nature of agentic AI, for example?
I don't think so, unless AI solves the role problem, which is the other way to look at it. So if you think about what role mining is, it's an intelligent way to join up data together, which is what AI is really good at. So I think as the technology gets better at role mining with AI, and the auditors get more comfortable with AI making decisions, then I think at that stage we can see roles working in a much faster deployment manner.
And this brings me to the topic of authorizations. I've seen plenty of customers are looking at a model where the authorization is being sort of decoupled from the traditional way of doing it, more externalized. They're looking at fine-grained authorizations. And we both know that have been in the industry for a long time that there's been attempts from various vendors and various initiatives, SACAMO, they have a tendency of failing. It doesn't scale that well. Do you think we're going to see a change in that? Do you think we're going to see something that actually come across and works?
So you've touched on one of my bugbears, which is when cloud started, we watched all these organizations have all these controls and processes in place for on-prem applications, and then they didn't deploy any of that to the cloud because it was too difficult. So now we have a whole bunch of cloud out there, and we have joiners and leavers, but we don't really have proper fine-grained entitlement management. So I think the future of this has to become policy-based access, either at runtime or just in time, but zero trusts, so zero access to anything with standing access. When you go into an application, you're going through a policy-based engine. The policy then defines what you can and can't do and gives you the access for that session.
But at some point, you need to manage those policies, right?
Yes.
Don't you get the same proliferation in policies versus you have with roles?
You do, but we're talking about a much smaller version of policies than you're talking about entitlements and roles. So the management of policies is defined across a framework of what you want to achieve, rather than this one little fine-grained entitlement can do X. It's your function can do X. And with the use of AI coming into these technologies now, the ability to define policies and understand policies is going to become easier.
I mean, you and I, we have a. You're representing the system integrator, the ones that actually put this stuff into motion, and I represent the vendors that are kind of hashing out the products and building the tools that you use to solve customers' problems. What message would you tell me as a vendor, and not just generically Radiant Logic, but all vendors, because we all try to solve the same problem?
I think the answer to what vendors can do better is we need to look at ways of fixing the process, like certifications. Let's talk about certifications for a second. We've been doing them, access reviews for how many years? The business hates them. They absolutely hate them. And Microsoft, with their B2B technology, came up with a really cool idea where what they said was, we're going to expire all your access, and if you want to keep it, you request it. You say, I want to keep it, and then it goes to the manager for an approval. Now, for some reason, it's a mental shift. You're doing an access approval, business doesn't mind. But when you do an access certification campaign, they hate it. It's the same thing. If you're reapproving access, you're doing an access review.
I guess that lines better with least privilege and zero trust philosophy. So it's actually a good shift in a mindset, isn't it?
But it's continuous certification, which we've been talking about since I can ever remember. And no one's ever really deployed continuous certification, where you're not doing one big bang quarterly campaigns or annual campaigns. You're continuously just making sure that your team have the access, and you're not doing it in a big chunk. You're doing it when the access expires. Do you want to keep it? And the employee says yes, goes to the manager. Manager says the employee had this access for a year. He wants to keep it. Can he keep it? And so it's continuous governance without the IT and security teams having to be involved, because it's going to automatically happen with all the reporting and audit trails around it.
Do we think that AI will at some point render certifications like this obsolete?
I think the challenge is the auditors, not the technology and not the businesses or the customers. So the auditors have to get comfortable that they accept that AI has made the decision for you and for the manager. When they can accept that the technology is doing what they will account for it to do, and the auditors will sign off on that, I think then we're going to see AI really make a lot more decisions for us.
Michael, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I'm going to wrap this up by asking you, if you were to address all your customers and prospects when they're trying to hash out, this is what we need to do, this is the outcome that we want, but they all failed in the past with these projects, they've been very prolonged. What type of recommendation would you pass on to the listeners that are, in the position of hashing out a new project or trying to solve some identity problems?
So most of the projects that I've seen fail is when customers have tried to do it themselves or hired contractors. And whether it's CyberIAM or another supplier, it's when you hire a contractor to come in and do a piece of work for you, that contract's got a limited amount of knowledge, right? When you hire a company like CyberIAM, you've got 90 people, consultants behind you. So that consultant gets to go and ask other consultants, gets to use our knowledge base for IP. And so having that force behind you and tried and tested processes is really key. And the second piece is making sure when you put in your statement of work together, your program together, make sure there's clarity on what you want and clarity on what you're going to get, so that you don't end up having a mix match of when it gets delivered, knowing that what you asked for isn't actually what you got.
Michael, I think that's very sound advice. And for all you who are listening to the podcast, I think we have managed to successfully figure out why these projects fail. And I think it's all about having that repeatable pattern that you can do, having the knowledge and the IP to repeat something that is successful. Michael, thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Radio Logic. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.